The diner, a small sanctuary of routine and quiet predictability, was shattered in an instant. Grace Torres had settled into her usual spot, the far left corner beneath the clock that always seemed to run 5 minutes slow, an unchanging beacon in her otherwise disrupted world. Her wheelchair, worn but reliable, rested steady beneath her as she prepared for another mundane shift. This place, with its creaking vinyl booths and burnt coffee, was a fragile refuge from the chaos she'd left behind in combat zones, places where she had wielded strength and resilience as weapons, where survival was etched into every breath. But today, the fragile piece cracked like glass. 3 men entered, their presence immediately loud and abrasive, like a storm invading calm seas. They carried the air of entitlement and aggression, leather vests adorned with patches, boots heavy enough to shake the floor beneath. They laughed with a kind of harshness that seeks to dominate, to claim ownership of every inch of space, every soul within it. And their eyes locked on Grace with a mixture of contempt and curiosity, as if she were a spectacle, a puzzle too inconvenient to ignore. "Places like this aren't made for wheels," one sneered, the voice cutting through the diner like a blade. It wasn't just a comment. It was a deliberate wound, an attempt to render her invisible by marking her as out of place, a disturbance in their world. Grace said nothing. She had long ago learned that silence was sometimes the only shield against those who sought to diminish you. But inside, something tightened, the years of discipline, the scars beneath her skin, the memories of war flashing like old film reels. One of the bikers leaned forward and tipped her wheelchair back just enough to send her rolling into the side of a booth. It was a cruel act, measured but ruthless in its intent. Silverware clattered to the floor. A coffee cup shattered near her feet. The physical pain was sharp, immediate, the sting of hot liquid on her arm, the jarring impact of falling hard on cold tile. But what cut deeper was the collective silence that followed. No gasps, no rush to aid, only the heavy, suffocating void where empathy should have been. Grace's hands, calloused and steady from years of combat, moved instinctively. She pressed herself up, steadying her breath, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a broken spirit. Yet beneath the surface, the assault echoed louder than any bullet wound. It wasn't just her body that was attacked. It was her dignity, her hard-won identity as a Marine, as a woman who had carried the weight of others in the most brutal of places. Around her, the diner remained frozen in that moment, bystanders who saw but chose to look away. The boy by the window stared wide-eyed, his innocence colliding with a harsh reality far beyond his years. His father's face tightened, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them, a recognition of wrong that hovered on the edge of action. Grace didn't scream. She didn't plead. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she reclaimed her space with quiet resolve, the echo of her Marine Corps training guiding her every movement. The coffee stains on her uniform, the bruises on her skin, they were battle scars of a different war, one fought in the trenches of everyday cruelty and ignorance. And in that charged silence, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the Rusty Fork Grill, something else stirred, a promise that this moment, this act of violence and disregard, would not be the end of her story. The diner's hum, a low murmur of clinking dishes and half-hearted conversations, carried on as if nothing had happened. Grace's fall, the violent tipping of her wheelchair, and the cruel jeers were swallowed whole by an indifferent silence that felt heavier than any shout. The customers, a mix of regulars and strangers, wore expressions that flickered briefly between shock and discomfort, but none dared to breach the invisible wall of apathy that separated witness from action. A middle-aged man nursing his black coffee stared blankly at the scene, his eyes flickering with a mixture of guilt and self-preservation. He told himself it wasn't his fight, that the world was already a battleground, and intervening meant risking his own fragile peace. His thoughts circled around mundane worries, work deadlines, bills, the slow ache in his back, each one a convenient excuse to remain still, to look away. Beside him, a woman adjusted her scarf, pretending to focus on her phone screen. The soft glow illuminated her face, but not her empathy. She rationalized the moment as an unfortunate incident, something someone else would or should handle. The buzz of the diner's fluorescent lights seemed louder than the cries she refused to hear. Her mind built a fortress of detachment, a silent contract with herself to preserve emotional distance. At a nearby table, a young couple exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. Their silence was louder than words. An unspoken question hung between them, poisoned by fear and uncertainty. The young man clenched his fists under the table, a flicker of anger warring with hesitation. The woman's eyes darted towards the door, searching for an escape from responsibility. Neither found the courage to break the spell of collective inaction. The boy by the window, too young to fully grasp the cruelty before him, felt a knot tighten in his chest. His father's cold shoulder told him this was a scene best ignored, a lesson in survival through silence. The boy's gaze lingered on Grace's bruised arms and the shattered coffee cup, imprinting a harsh image on his impressionable mind, a tableau of vulnerability met with neglect. Grace, caught in this cold web of apathy, felt the weight of isolation descend upon her like a suffocating shroud. Her body ached, but it was the void around her, the absence of help, of solidarity, that wounded deepest. The invisible barrier erected by those who witnessed but did nothing was a testament to a society quick to judge and slow to act, a world where pain often goes unnoticed because it is inconvenient. Yet within her, a quiet flame flickered, wounded but unextinguished. The sting of betrayal by silence fueled a fierce determination, a resolve to confront not only the aggression that had struck her, but also the pervasive indifference that allowed it to flourish. She understood, with painful clarity, that true battlefields were not only in foreign lands but also in the hearts of those who turn away from suffering. And so, amidst the clatter of untouched plates and the murmur of distracted voices, Grace straightened her back and fixed her gaze forward. The day's wounds were raw, but they marked the beginning of a reckoning, not just with those who had assaulted her, but with a world that had chosen to look the other way. The air in the diner was thick with tension and silence when finally, the sharp ring of a phone cut through the stifling stillness like a lifeline thrown into a storm. It was Grace's call, her fingers trembling but determined as they gripped the device. Her voice, steady but laced with the undercurrent of exhaustion and pain, broke the invisible wall of apathy. She spoke clearly, her words an urgent summons that rippled outward like a beacon. Marines needed. The name she uttered was not just a signal but a call for justice, for solidarity, for a reckoning that transcended the physical wounds inflicted on her. As the call ended, a slow shift began in the atmosphere, subtle but undeniable. Outside, the distant rumble of engines approached, growing louder and more purposeful. The arrival of the Marines was not merely the sound of machines. It was the arrival of a force bound by unspoken codes, brotherhood, loyalty, honor. Their presence was a stark contrast to the earlier helplessness, a tangible symbol that Grace was not alone, that the bond forged in service would not allow her to suffer in silence. Each Marine stepped through the door with the weight of their own experiences etched into their faces, stories of battle, sacrifice, and survival hidden beneath the disciplined exterior. Their eyes, trained to read the battlefield, now searched the diner's interior with a sharp intensity. They saw the signs, the overturned wheelchair, the shattered cup, the bruises painted across Grace's skin, and understood the gravity of the moment without needing words. Grace's gaze met theirs, a flicker of relief mingled with vulnerability. The invisible armor she wore cracked just enough to reveal the deep well of trust she placed in these comrades. They approached her with careful respect, sensing the layers beneath her calm exterior, the fatigue, the pain, the simmering anger that refused to consume her. There was no pity in their eyes, only recognition and resolve. The leader of the group knelt beside her wheelchair, his voice low but firm as he asked what happened. Grace recounted the assault, each word heavy with unspoken emotion, hurt, betrayal, defiance. As she spoke, the Marines listened not just to the facts but to the pain behind them, the silent wounds inflicted by a society quick to judge and slow to defend its own. Their response was immediate but measured: calls to law enforcement, coordinated plans to ensure her safety, and most importantly, a promise that she would be supported every step of the way. The arrival of the Marines ignited a spark in the room, transforming it from a place of victimization into a theater of resilience and solidarity. Outside, the engines quieted, and the weight of their presence settled over the diner like a shield. Grace, surrounded by those who understood the battlefield's both external and internal, felt the first stirrings of hope. The journey ahead would be arduous, the scars deep and lasting, but she was no longer isolated. The call had been answered, not just by sirens and boots, but by the unyielding spirit of a community bound by shared sacrifice. In that moment, beneath the harsh glare of the diner's fluorescent lights, Grace's fight became more than personal. It became a testament to the power of connection, courage, and the unwavering promise that no one would stand alone. The weight of the uniform was more than fabric. It was a mantle of history, sacrifice, and unspoken promises that pressed gently yet insistently upon the shoulders of each Marine present. Grace watched as they moved with a quiet authority, not the loud bravado of those craving recognition, but the steady, unyielding presence of those who understood the true meaning of respect and strength. It was a strength forged not in domination, but in the humility of service, the acceptance of burdens heavier than the body, heavier than the soul. In the soft exchange of glances between the Marines, Grace glimpsed a complex web of unspoken communication, a language of shared hardship, resilience, and an ironclad code that transcended words. Each of them carried the invisible scars of battles fought far from this small diner, battles that had shaped their understanding of vulnerability and power. They knew too well the razor's edge between control and chaos, between despair and hope, and it was this balance that gave their presence an almost sacred gravity. As one Marine reached out to steady her wheelchair, the gesture was deliberate but gentle, an unspoken vow that she was not alone, that in their unity, she could find refuge from the isolation that had threatened to consume her. Grace felt something stir within her, a fragile yet fierce ember of trust rekindled by their unwavering respect. It was a respect that acknowledged her strength, her pain, and her humanity, refusing to let her be reduced to a mere victim or a symbol. Their conversations, low and measured, were laced with empathy and determination. They spoke not only of immediate safety and the steps to follow, but also of something more enduring: the reaffirmation of dignity in the face of degradation, the restoration of agency where it had been stolen. Grace listened as they outlined plans that went beyond protocol, plans that involved community, support, and a commitment to ensure that no one else would suffer in silence. Within this circle of military solidarity, Grace found herself confronting the paradox of power. That true strength was not in inflicting pain or asserting dominance, but in the courage to stand firm in vulnerability, to face the scars of the past without flinching. The Marines embodied this truth, their composed presence a testament to the transformative power of respect, honor, and shared purpose. As the evening deepened and the diner's harsh fluorescent lights softened into shadows, Grace realized that this encounter marked a turning point. The raw wounds of the day, while still aching, were beginning to be met with a force greater than pain, one built on the foundations of respect and strength woven through the ranks of those who served. It was a force that promised not only protection but a profound reaffirmation of what it meant to be seen, to be valued, and ultimately, to be strong. In their presence, Grace no longer felt fragmented or forsaken. She was part of something larger, a living, breathing testament to resilience and the unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of shared struggle. The respect she received was not just an external offering, but a mirror reflecting her own latent strength back to her, igniting a resolve that would carry her through the darkness to come. The diner, once a quiet refuge that bore the mundane rhythms of everyday life, began to shift subtly but irrevocably in the wake of the events that had unfolded within its walls. The fluorescent lights that had flickered with indifferent hum now seemed to pulse with a new energy, an undercurrent of awareness and vigilance that transformed the space from a mere backdrop of routine into a crucible of change. What had once been a place where stories passed like idle chatter became a sanctuary of shared experience and collective resolve. At first, the change was barely perceptible. A glance held a little longer, a conversation that lingered beyond polite exchange, the soft murmur of voices that dared to acknowledge the fractures beneath the surface of the community. The patrons, once strangers occupying the same space, started to knit themselves together through fragile threads of empathy and understanding. Grace noticed it most acutely in the way eyes met hers, not with pity or avoidance, but with something deeper, a recognition that spoke of shared wounds and a burgeoning commitment to healing. The diner staff, who had been mere bystanders to life's unfolding dramas, found themselves stepping into roles of quiet guardianship. Their smiles grew warmer, their attentiveness sharper, not because they were instructed to, but because they had come to understand the weight of presence, the power of small acts of kindness in a world often indifferent to pain. The owner, once content to keep the peace at the surface level, now held conversations that dared to confront discomfort, fostering an environment where silence no longer equaled complicity. Outside the diner's walls, the ripple extended into the broader community. Where once there had been whispers and denial about the fractures hidden beneath the surface, now emerged dialogues, awkward, raw, but necessary. Town meetings that had been perfunctory affairs transformed into spaces where stories could be told and heard without judgment. People began to grasp that the strength of their community lay not in ignoring the cracks, but in embracing them, in allowing vulnerability to forge deeper connections. Grace, herself a living testament to pain and resilience, became an unspoken symbol of this transformation. Her presence challenged the community's silence, demanding that they confront uncomfortable truths and reckon with their collective responsibility. Yet, beneath the surface of her quiet courage lay a complex emotional landscape, fear mingled with hope, anger tempered by the fragile promise of renewal. She knew the journey ahead would be neither swift nor easy, but in the gentle solidarity that now filled the diner, she glimpsed the faint outlines of a path forward. In the nights that followed, as the diner closed its doors and the streets emptied, Grace would sometimes sit alone by the window, watching the shadows stretch and fold around the buildings. The transformation of the diner and community was not just external. It was a mirror reflecting the ongoing internal battle within every individual to reclaim dignity, to forgive, and to rebuild trust. It was a reminder that change was not a singular event, but a continuous process of breaking and mending, of confronting darkness with the fragile light of hope. And so the diner stood, no longer just a place to eat or pass the time, but a living symbol of transformation, where respect was rekindled, strength was shared, and a community, once fractured by silence and fear, began to heal in the collective embrace of acknowledgement and compassion. The weight of tradition lay heavily on Grace's shoulders, not as a burden, but as an intricate tapestry woven from the lives and sacrifices of those who had come before her. It was a legacy threaded with honor and hardship, a delicate balance between reverence for the past and the necessity to forge a path forward. Each stitch in this tapestry was a story, a memory, a lesson carried silently through generations like a whispered vow. As she sat quietly in the dim glow of the fading day, the murmurs of those who had walked this road before echoed in her mind, their voices a chorus of strength and vulnerability intertwined. The room around her seemed to breathe with the presence of ancestors whose faces she had never seen but whose spirits were unmistakably close. Soldiers who had borne witness to horrors unimaginable, who had faced fear and despair, yet chose to stand firm in the face of it. They were the keepers of a sacred flame, a flame not of destruction, but of resilience and hope that must be passed on, even when the night threatened to consume it. Grace understood that tradition was not merely about repetition or ritual, it was about continuity, about carrying forward the lessons etched in pain and perseverance. Her own journey had become a crucible for this transmission, a testing ground where the old and new collided in raw, often painful ways. The rituals she once viewed as distant and rigid now revealed themselves as anchors in the storm, providing a framework within which to navigate chaos. Yet, the tradition demanded more than obedience. It called for introspection, for a reckoning with the parts of herself she had long tried to bury. It asked her to confront not only the legacy of those who fought before, but also the legacy she would leave behind. In the quiet moments between the demands of the present, Grace found herself wrestling with the tension between honoring tradition and embracing change. She recognized the necessity of adaptation, that the strength of any lineage depended on its ability to evolve without losing its core. The memories of battles fought and comrades lost served as both warning and inspiration, urging her to carry the torch with a fierce integrity, but also with an openness to new ways of being strong, of protecting, of healing. The continuity of tradition was not a solitary path. It was threaded through the connections between those who had come before, those who walked beside her now, and those who would follow. She saw this in the careful, deliberate mentorship offered by the older Marines, a passing of knowledge that was as much about the heart as it was about skill. Their stories were not just histories but living dialogues, conversations that transcended time and circumstance. Through their eyes, Grace glimpsed the profound responsibility of stewardship, the delicate trust placed in her hands to nurture what had been entrusted to her. This transmission was fraught with the weight of expectation, but also infused with a quiet hope. The hope that, even amid darkness, the flame would not falter, that resilience could be reborn in every act of courage, every choice to uphold honor in the face of pain. Grace understood that tradition was alive, not static, a living testament to the enduring human spirit that refuses to break, no matter how fierce the storm. As night deepened around her, the legacy of those before her settled into her bones, steady and unyielding. She felt, in that moment, the profound connection between past, present, and future, a continuum of strength that transcended time and circumstance. The torch was in her hands now, fragile yet fiercely bright, and she knew that how she carried it would shape not only her own story, but the stories of all those who would follow. In this understanding, Grace found a solemn peace, a promise to honor, to protect, and to continue the sacred dance of tradition and renewal. In the quiet aftermath of turmoil, when the echoes of conflict began to fade into the recesses of memory, Grace found herself standing at the crossroads of reflection and resolve. The journey she had traversed was neither linear nor simple. It was a labyrinth of shifting shadows and fragile lights, relentless negotiation between vulnerability and strength. Every moment had carved deep into her psyche, shaping the contours of a soul forever altered yet unbroken. She realized that the true battle was not only fought in the clamor of external strife, but in the silent chambers of the mind, where doubt, fear, and hope waged their ceaseless war. As she traced the invisible threads connecting the fractured pieces of her experience, Grace understood that healing was not a destination but an ongoing process, a delicate dance of acceptance and courage. The wounds inflicted by cruelty and misunderstanding had left scars, yes, but they had also forged new pathways of empathy and resilience. In embracing these scars, she reclaimed her narrative from the grip of pain, transforming suffering into a source of profound insight and compassion. The past, with all its harsh lessons, no longer defined her. Instead, it became a foundation upon which she could build a future shaped by intentionality and grace. The community around her mirrored this transformation in subtle, yet profound ways. Where once silence had reigned, there now blossomed a tentative dialogue, fragile yet fertile, a testament to the power of shared acknowledgement. Grace saw how respect, when restored, became a quiet revolution, shifting the very fabric of relationships and collective identity. The bonds of solidarity, once weakened by fear and division, grew stronger as people dared to face uncomfortable truths together. In these moments, the abstract concepts of honor and strength took on tangible form, lived out in the courage to forgive, to listen, and to rebuild trust. Within Grace herself, the complexity of her inner world unfolded like a vast landscape, marked by peaks of hope and valleys of doubt. She grappled with the paradoxes that define the human condition, the simultaneous fragility and tenacity of spirit, the interplay of light and shadow that shaped every choice and every step forward. It was in this intricate interplay that she discovered her true power, not in unyielding perfection, but in the willingness to be authentically vulnerable, to confront pain without retreat, and to move forward even when the path was obscured. Ultimately, Grace's story was not just her own. It was a reflection of the universal struggle to find meaning amid chaos, to hold onto dignity when faced with dehumanization, and to cultivate hope in the darkest of times. The scars she bore and the strength she embodied were threads woven into the larger tapestry of human experience, reminders that resilience is born not from avoidance of suffering but from the courageous choice to rise despite it. As the night deepened and the world around her settled into quietude, Grace felt a profound sense of peace, not because the journey was over, but because she had embraced the journey fully, with all its complexity and contradiction. In that acceptance lay a promise, to carry forward the lessons learned, to honor the past without being confined by it, and to face whatever lay ahead with a heart tempered by both pain and hope. It was here, in this delicate balance, that true healing began, and the story continued.